Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunities hearing today entitled Examining VA's Information Technology Systems that Provide Economic Opportunities for Veterans. The timely and accurate adjudication of the myriad of benefits that VA provides to veterans and their dependents is critical to their economic success. In order to process these claims effectively, VA must have modern IT systems in place that are adaptable and highly functional. That's what we are here to discuss today, and by the end of today's hearing, I hope that we all have a better understanding of how we can improve VA's IT systems to lead to positive economic outcomes for veterans and their families. I would first like to touch on VA's long-term solution, or LTS. This system was designed to process and adjudicate post-9/11 GI Bill claims with little to no human interaction. While great strides have been made since the initial onslaught of delayed GI Bill payments back in 2009, I remain concerned that the improving and finishing the LTS is still not a priority for the department and its senior leaders. And while supplemental claims have been completed in a more timely fashion, it's still taking too long for original claims to be completed. With the department moving the LTS into sustainment mode, there doesn't seem to be an appetite to make more improvements to the LTS, improvements that are needed, and that is disappointing. This committee has moved my legislation that would provide an additional $30 million to finish the LTS once and for all, and I will do all I can to push it across the finish line. I do want to discuss for a moment some concerns that our witnesses and other individuals have raised about unexpected delays in GI Bill payments that occurred this fall. Due to the system's shortfalls, I've been told that in the past, the Education Service has been granted overtime funding to help adjudicate claims for the typically busy fall semester time frame. We've been told, however, that this year was different, and the overtime funding usually given to the Education Service was instead repurposed to fund additional overtime to bring down the disability claims backlog. This reallocation of money and shift in priorities left many schools waiting for tuition payments from the VA, and left veterans waiting far too long to receive their living stipends. And some are still waiting. While I know we can all agree that it is a worthy goal to bring down the disability claims backlog, it's not acceptable to leave another group of veterans waiting. Instead of coming forward with a clear plan to address both situations, it appears that the department once again took the misguided view that disability claims were more important than education claims. This is nothing more than just robbing Peter to pay Paul. I also want to speak about the Veteran Employment Center, or the VEC. This is a job board that was created by the department through e-benefits and is now the sole employment portal for veterans in the entire federal government. While I understand that the VEC was created on a shoestring budget and is still being improved, I'm concerned that VA may have been too hasty in promoting its use and may be inflating its true value as well as its functionality. We have been told that this program is now being taught at all TAP classes worldwide, but due to some possible data security breaches and the inability to actually access the system during the TAP session, some senior officials at DoD have threatened to stop teaching the use of the VEC altogether. I'm also concerned that there's no way to track the number of jobs or successful outcomes that have come from the VEC, and I have even heard rumors that some VA contractors are required to log into the VEC every day to improve page views. Finally, we have heard that employers don't want to use the VEC as they find the system to not be user-friendly and ineffective in giving them a true idea of veteran skills or talents. While I'm not saying that the creation of the VEC was not done with the best of intentions, I do think the department should examine these types of concerns and take immediate actions to improve the VEC for veterans of all generations. Finally, as I have said in previous hearings, I'm interested in learning more about the new paperless case management system being developed for tracking VR and e-participants. I'm sure we can all agree that such a system is long overdue. With that, I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Takano, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When the post-9/11 GI Bill became law in 2008, it was clear that the array of benefits and beneficiaries included were far more complicated than had been the case in previous GI Bill laws. It was also clear that it was going to take state-of-the-art IT to make it all work in a timely and accessible way for student veterans. So we're here today to assess how the original plans for quick, paperless processing and easy access, called the Long-Term Solution, or LTS, have panned out, and how we can speed matters along from here. It is clear that there have been bumps in the road. For example, this fall there were a significant number of complaints as student veterans experienced longer delays than usual in their receipt of tuition and housing allowance payments. We also know from a recent GAO report that VA has been making overpayments on GI Bill benefits. This problem can arise when a student veteran drops classes, but VA fails to adjust the veteran's status in its IT system. GI Bill overpayments have created financial hardships when student veterans learn about the overpayments and are asked to pay VA back. My greatest concern is that it is difficult enough for veterans transitioning from military service to student life without having to navigate the additional barriers to graduation that these IT problems can create for them. Clearly, the demands of the Office of Information Technology at VA are huge. Our concern today is that the education and employment programs are a priority for VA, just as the programs of the Veterans Health Administration must be. In addition to hearing about progress on the LTS and GI Bill overpayments, I am looking forward to updates on the Veterans Employment Center, or VEC, and its promise of a one-stop internet source for veterans looking for meaningful employment. I'll be interested to hear about VA's efforts to create a system for the paperless processing of VR&E claims and updates to the post-9/11 GI Bill comparison tool. Finally, I look forward to the testimony of the Student Veterans of America and the American Legion about what their members have experienced in these areas, and I appreciate Deputy Undersecretary Coy and the others from VA who are all working on these challenges. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Takano. I now invite our first panel to the table. With us today, we have Mr. Davy Leghorn, Assistant Director for the American Legion's National Veterans Employment and Education Division, and Mr. Will Hubbard, Vice President of Government Affairs for Student Veterans of America. Welcome back to both of you, and I thank you for being here today. Your complete written statements will be made part of the hearing record, and both of you will be recognized for 5 minutes for your oral statement. So let's begin with you, Mr. Leghorn. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Improving the information technology used to manage VA education and employment benefits is important. It can save money and make programs and services run more efficiently to the benefit of veterans. However, we must not overlook human factors involved in ensuring that veterans get the tools and counseling they need to maximize their education opportunities and transition into their civilian careers. Chairman Wenstrup, Ranking Member Takano, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, on behalf of National Commander Dale Barnett and the over 2 million members of the American Legion, we thank you for the opportunity to testify on this issue. As part of VA's efforts to improve post-9/11 GI Bill claims processing, the automated long-term solution was implemented with the intention of having the time it takes to process benefit payments. In theory, it's supposed to take human claims processors out of the equation using computer systems to process claims. However, VA's IT systems have not yet automated all original and supplemental claims. Due to time limitations and prioritization of effort, VA has focused on automating the supplemental claims, but not even all of the supplemental claims have been automated at this point. It is clear that VA requires additional funding to enhance LTS with functionality to process all original and supplemental claims with little human intervention. In March of this year, the American Legion supported legislation that would mandate that VA complete the transition to a full IT solution. A new released GAO report further demonstrates room for improvement with VA IT. The report shows that VA is overpaying schools and veterans when post-9/11 GI Bill users drop a class or leave school. The process that VA uses for addressing overpayments should be improved. This would create more certainty for student veterans and also help VA become better stewards of taxpayer dollars. The American Legion, therefore, encourages Congress to authorize and appropriate the necessary resources for IT solutions which would reduce the labor-intensive nature of these tasks and reduce the burden for repaying overpayments which falls disproportionately on veterans. With regards to VA's Veterans Employment Center, the American Legion believes there is great potential in this one-stop veterans employment platform. While continued IT improvements with online applications are encouraged, we should not ignore the VA employment specialists and coordinators that work directly with veterans. We believe that the best thing we can do for the VEC is to build and improve the services around it. VA is the focal point of veterans programs and services, so the consolidation of the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program and Jobs for Veterans state grants funding and services under VA's Office of Economic Opportunities simply makes sense. Therefore, we reiterate our support for Chairman Miller's Job for Veterans Act of 2015. Finally, the American Legion does not oppose VA moving ahead to a paperless case management system for vocational rehabilitation and employment program as they have done for disability claims with the Veterans Benefit Management System. However, we hope that problems that have plagued VA's previous attempts to go paperless would not plague any such effort. The American Legion understands that rehabilitation counselors' caseloads has increased dramatically as a result of better marketing of VR&E services and the influx of service-disabled veterans over the last decade. We believe the most effective way of decreasing the caseload assigned to each rehabilitation counselor is by hiring more counselors. We recognize that hiring additional full-time counselors may not be the most cost-effective option, so alternatively, VA might want to consider contracting out for employment and rehabilitation counselors until the caseload can be brought down to a manageable level for VA counselors. In summary, by improving the operations of the LTS, VA can help process the education benefits more efficiently and reduce unnecessary processes that create debt problems for both the government and veterans pursuing their education. More attention to the functionality of the VEC can give both veterans and employers better tools to match capable veterans to the jobs they need. However, we must not forget the importance of the human factor and the need for employment counselors and specialists who can get veterans on the right track and avoid letting them slip through the cracks. As always, the American Legion thanks this committee for the opportunity to offer testimony, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Leghorn. Mr. Hubbard, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Wenstrup, Ranking Member Takano, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting Student Veterans of America to submit our testimony on examining VA's information technology systems that provide economic opportunity for veterans. With over 1,200 chapters across the country, we are pleased to share the perspective of those most directly impacted by this committee here today. In this testimony, we will address the Veteran Employment Center, or VEC, platform and processing delays we saw with the student veterans headed to school this fall. We look forward to working with the Department of Veterans Affairs and this committee on these issues. The VEC is the federal government's most recent response to unemployment among veteran populations. There are multiple positive aspects of the VEC which we would like to highlight. Notably, we applaud the intent to create a consolidated program. Also, the demonstration of real and impactful public-private partnerships is worth highlighting, especially the partnership with LinkedIn. While we note the positives and the potential of the VEC, we maintain concerns over several aspects of the program's operation. First, we hope to see user adoption addressed in the coming months. The number of veteran profiles on the site is the true incentive for employer participation in the platform. Similarly, we believe employer participation is hampered by the platform's interface, which is not as intuitive and user-friendly as we'd hope to see in the future. Second, it is clear that data tracking and the outcomes of the VEC are not presently available. Since the tool is meant to connect veterans with employers, we would hope to see the VA address outcome tracking related to hires resulting from connections to the platform, as well as employee retention data. Third, Discussions with potential site users demonstrated a desire to have a live coordinator or advisor to connect with. In particular, we would like to see the functionality included to allow case managers to access profiles and the progress of military members and veterans in their portfolio. In the process of reviewing the VEC, there were some questions that we believe merit further discussion. These include, how many hires have come from result of the VEC? How are job commitments by employers being translated into local jobs for veterans? What is the funding stream? What can be done to make the platform accessible to other borrowers, in addition to the Internet Explorer? What is currently being done to make the tool mobile accessible? We are highly appreciative of VA's commitment to supporting veterans in multiple aspects of their lives. The VBA has largely demonstrated the will and commitment that we believe is required to support veterans properly. We hope to see this will translated into future updates with the VEC, so the intent and the mission of the program is fully achieved. Turning to GI Bill processing issues, this fall highlighted several challenges that directly impacted student veterans. In early September, significant delays in the processing of GI Bill benefits became an obvious concern. The impact of these delays is tangible and unfortunately very real. One of our own chapter presidents shared, "I had one student vet surviving on his GI Bill by living in a storage unit and sometimes sleeping in the library." Ultimately, the core challenge remains the VA's reliance on overtime hours for full-time employees during the peak periods of the fall and spring enrollment. Under a unique solution with the National Student Clearinghouse, VA and taxpayers incur no additional cost since schools select to send the data through NSC, paying for the cost of the service, while VA benefits from streamlined data submissions and research capabilities in conjunction with the Department of Education data is made available. This all with the added benefit of real-time measurement of completions and program efficacy, and we are happy to discuss this concept in more detail. We understand there is ongoing discussion of a solution within VA and believe that the NSC proposal should be considered for incorporation or as an advisory role. On a separate note, I would like to make mention that we recently signed the agreement with the VA and the NSC to pursue follow-on research to the Million Records Project. I look forward to keeping this committee updated on the progress. We thank the committee for this opportunity to testify on these important issues, and we look forward to working with this committee and its members for any questions they may have.
Well, I thank you both for your testimony, and I now yield myself 5 minutes for questions. I also want to applaud the work that you're doing to try and cooperate with the VA and to try and make things better and to come forth with solutions. So the first question I have for both of you is, were either of your organizations consulted by the VA during the development of the VEC, and was your feedback sought? Were you able to engage and give some feedback for those trying to engage in the VEC? Mr. Leghorn, you can go first.
Chairman Winstrup, the American Legion was consulted when they created VEC. I believe VA brought the major VSOs into a room after their first or second beta testing, and they asked for our feedback and also to give us a briefing on it. One of our suggestions that we saw that they did implement was that we wanted it to be simple. You know, instead of building the next career builder or you know, whatever job search employer website, we wanted something that would be really easy to navigate, and I believe what we have now is something that is rather bare bones and really easy for the veterans to navigate, at least.
From our end, Mr. Chairman, I don't recall being consulted, but I do think that the plans that we have with VA currently to set up a demonstration presents the will and interest to making sure that this tool is working properly.
I think that's valuable, and I appreciate it on both ends. Can you give me maybe some idea of a type of metric that you think should be used for tracking the VEC's success or finding its flaws?
I'll take that, Mr. Chairman. So I believe that both hiring rates and then also retention rates are two key indicators that should be looked at. As a tool that's allowing for veterans to find employment, the ultimate outcome being employment, understanding what those hiring practices are, what the numbers look like, and then also on the retention side with those employers, I think it would be valuable.
Yeah, Mr. Leghorn.
So much like what Will just said, two things that we noticed were severely lacking have always been performance metrics and retention statistics. Most of what we have right now are mostly anecdotal, and HR does not usually track things like how long a veteran currently stays at a job compared to their civilian counterpart. The VEC is a great platform to start convincing HR and government and the private sector to start collecting this information.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think really what you want to do is not only have someone find a job, but be able to stay in a job and to make sure that we're getting the right matches, if you will, and really knowing what your long-term results are. So obviously there has to be a continuity of contact with the veteran, and I think that that's one of the metrics, obviously, that needs to be employed for that to work. Let me ask you both, too, what are you learning from students nationwide? Some students still waiting to receive their housing stipend, and some schools waiting to receive their tuition. What are you hearing on that front?
So, Mr. Chairman, on that front, we're hearing that the delays have persisted but are decreasing. I haven't heard new cases of delays. To my knowledge, the VA did submit for overtime to address the backlog that was presented and became obvious in September. I haven't heard new cases, and I do appreciate them taking the time to address that issue clearly and publicly.
Thank you, Mr. Leghorn.
Chairman Wenstrup, I am not the person that handles education issues with American Legion, so I will have to take that question for the record.
Okay, I appreciate that. I guess the next question I have is what can we do? What are your suggestions on making this more user-friendly? And I think you touched on that a little bit, but if you guys could share, either one of you or both of you, what suggestions you might have to make it more user-friendly and more accessible, the VEC system.
So I think what would be helpful, first off, is some type of mobile platform. We know that currently student veterans are a highly mobile population and oftentimes quite connected to technology. So having that as a functionality would be helpful. But beyond that, I think actually what would be more supportive is to have the ability for a case manager to be able to access profiles and track individuals that they're working with. If they have individuals in their portfolio, members of the military or veterans, to be able to look and see the employers that they're connecting with, how those interactions are going, and what the results are, I think would allow for them to give tailored feedback and provide good advice on that search.
So one of the things that we've heard from employers is that they are being asked by too many competing job search platforms to look for employees on their websites. And this is a problem because VEC is a newcomer. And if an employer hops on a site and the search and navigation function is not readily intuitive, HR is going to revert to using a platform that they are familiar with and they have been using already. Yeah, when companies think about hiring veterans, they usually flock to DoD programs because they're in their mind they're thinking about transitioning veterans. And VEC really needs more market share in the veterans hiring arena to let the companies know that they have access to an even larger pool of veterans and spouses on their website than compared to some of the DoD programs.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, and I now recognize the ranking member for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I'm going to focus my first question or questions on the GI Bill comparison tool. And here's where I'm coming from. I was impressed 2 years ago when I visited the Community College Veterans Center in my district at Riverside Community College. The veterans there seem to have a great awareness of conserving their benefits because we have a low-cost community college system in California, conserving their benefits for graduate school. And I thought, gee, they're really being taught a very sophisticated strategy in how to use the generous GI benefits we have under the post 9/11 bill. So community colleges in my mind, offer students, a really good opportunity, especially in California, to combine low cost with curricular options that allow them to complete associate's degrees, certificates, and to transfer to four-year schools. In your opinion, does the current GI Bill comparison tool present community colleges as a favorable option for veterans compared to four-year nonprofit schools or for-profit schools? Either one of you, if you care to.
Thank you for the question, sir. I think it does ultimately provide a pretty uniform and even look at different schools across different sectors and different levels. I think ultimately, though, it can sometimes be a little deceiving because in some cases, an individual will look down at the section that shows if the school is POE compliant, if they have signed on to the various veteran supporting networks. And I think at times that provides maybe an unfair view of what the school actually supports. What I always recommend for individuals to do as they are considering school is to reach out to the Student Veterans of America chapter on campus and to talk to the veterans who are right on the campus and get a very clear view of what they might do. I think that's been always a beneficial avenue for them to find out information. And if you go onto the tool as it stands, there's a line on there that allows for individuals to see if there's a student veteran group on campus. If there is, they can go directly to the homepage through the comparison tool, which I think is highly beneficial.
Recently I was interacting with a veteran over the telephone. I often go to my office and call constituents who've written into us about a certain challenge they're having. This particular veteran, needed an advocate, and he was on VRNE. That's how he was financing his education, through VRNE. And, his counselor, it seemed to me the counselor just didn't have the time to be the advocate. He's got a full caseload. And this particular veteran I'm thinking of had also some issues with PTS and contributed to part of his challenge on campus. So I was interested to hear, I think it was Mr. Leghorn, talk about this concern about the goal of complete automation, as opposed to also paying attention to hiring counselors. So my question, if you could explain this, we also had a great hearing last week. The chairman, we brought in a young man from Nebraska who was talking about the VSOC program, and I was surprised to learn that VSOC counselors also have a VRNE caseload, which to me means that they have little time to also address the wider veterans community that aren't necessarily on VRNE, but also need counseling advice. So I'll just turn it over to the other one of you to respond.
Okay, so with regards to full automation, what we were talking about was with the GI Bill, it's one of those benefits where depending on your dates of service, you either have it or you don't. So triaging something like that can be fully automated with minimum human interaction. With regards to the high-touch counseling services, what we were talking about was building that around the VEC. It's great to have that platform, but we need to have the counselors and the specialists there to work with the people after they've created a profile on the VEC. And the same thing with VRNE. Obviously that's a place where you really need intensive employment counseling.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Boss, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Leghorn, can you go into a little more detail maybe about the type of feedback that you've been getting from HR departments for larger employers and the effectiveness of the VEC?
On top of what I said earlier, another issue that they've had was with the skills translator. Skills translators are supposed to crank out auto-generated civilian skills for the resume, and that's what they're supposed to do. We can't really change that. But for the HR personnel in these big companies, what they find is that it's practically useless if it's put on a resume, because they still have to devote time to calling the applicant and asking them what you did in service and what have you accomplished. And the onus is really on the user to take the auto text that they get from the skills translator to paraphrase them into a narrative that reflects their time in service, because they've told us that a resume with generic bullet points that are obviously ripped from the website quickly finds its way into the trash bin.
Okay. Do you, and this is for both of you, do you believe that maybe the VEC was rolled out too fast and maybe not ready for prime time?
So thank you for the question, sir. I think that ultimately there were, over the last several years, a lot of tools that have come out. Obviously, veterans employment is a hot topic, a topic of priority for the American public, as it should be. And with the interest in engaging in a comprehensive tool, such as the VEC, I think ultimately a lot of the previous tools that maybe had been working, Hero to Hired is a good example of something that had been working, which incorporated, as my colleague pointed out, that high-touch capacity, the ability for case managers to be involved directly. I think a lot of those functions were not necessarily incorporated into the current version, which is not to say that they still couldn't be. In my conversations with individuals at the VA, they've expressed an interest in improving the tool, which we're very interested in working with them on.
Okay. Sir, looking back, I would say that yes, it was rolled out too fast, because the success of the VEC really comes from the cache of resumes and profiles that you had in there. I think in the beginning we should have rolled it out to the transitioning service members and veterans first to build up an ample cache of resumes and profiles before we fine-tuned it and turn it over to the large employers.
Yeah, I as I listen to this and listen to the fact that, great idea. Would both of you agree with that? It's a great idea, and it's trying to move ourselves into the future to make sure that we can get them hired as fast as possible, and use technology to the best of our ability, correct? And I guess that the thing I see here is some things, no matter how much they change, are still the same. I'm not going to try to date myself here, but the month I went into the Marine Corps, the month before was when they stopped paying with cash on the parade decks all around the United States and the world. And the next month was when they started paying with checks, and all of a sudden, many of us got no pay due because they rolled a system out very, very quickly. And we want to move forward into the future, but quite often we're not necessarily ready to do everything we're supposed to do. Do you see the opportunity for us to get this correct?
Sir, I think there is that opportunity, and I think the VA is trying to do that. In the conversations we've had, it's clear that there is that intent to make sure that this tool is functioning properly. I don't think it's there yet.
Okay. Sir, we absolutely think VA is on the right track here. If we compared it to its predecessor, My Next Move for Veterans, I mean, this platform has garnered more recognition than its predecessor ever did. So,
well, I know this committee appreciates your input, and hopefully we can work to try to work with them to improve it to where it works the way it's supposed to. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Rice, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it seems to me that the veterans who are most in need of the services of the VR and E are those who are either unemployed or homeless or both. And my question is, what's the outreach to those veterans?
Ma'am, if I could address this, I actually believe that what the VA has set up in the VSOC program, as the ranking member pointed out, is the right approach. The tools that they have set up with the VSOC program allows counselors to reach out directly to individuals, but not just leave them. It allows them to work with them and understand their case and work effectively. So I think that's what needs to happen more broadly. It's not necessarily happening now, and I think as a result, some individuals are slipping through the cracks, and individuals who do need more attention are getting less. So I think by taking that model of the VSOC program and applying it more broadly, I think some of that can be addressed.
So why hasn't that been done?
I would defer to my colleagues from the VA on the next panel.
So in the instance where a veteran who is going to classes on the GI Bill either withdraws or drops out, withdraws from a class or drops out of a semester, how is that information communicated to the VA? And in terms of to prevent the overpayment situation that we were talking about before, number one. And number two, is that a red flag for the VA to ensure that some counselor, that veteran is contacted by a counselor to see what might be going on that is causing the withdrawal or the problems with continuing in school?
Ma'am, I think this is a great question. To give you some idea of why some of that might be the case, I think it's important to understand the current process of how the payments are being made. The way that things are working and the way the data is being reported right now, if you understand, on one side you have schools, and on the other side you have the Department of Defense, you have Department of Education, the VA. Right now those schools are independently reporting to these different departments, just to name a few. So in the
what do you mean independently reported?
So the schools currently, the Department of Defense asks certain questions of the schools for tuition assistance, for example. Department of Education has their own questions regarding Pell Grants, for example. And then the VA has their own questions regarding veterans benefits and the GI Bill. Right now, the way the process works is the schools get essentially, for lack of a better term, surveys from the different departments and agencies, and they're expected to reply differently. About 70% of the data that's being asked, name, social security number, program of study, it's all the same. So right now, these schools are being asked to reply to all these different departments and agencies with a lot of the same information, but some different. As a result, it shouldn't be a surprise that in this flow of data that some things come up missing. So with the proposal that we've addressed with the VA and would look forward to sharing with you in more detail, we think that this process can be streamlined through a single auditing agency that would allow compliance to be ensured, but also to make sure that the data is clean, clear, and efficient.
How does that get implemented?
That's something that we're working with our colleagues at the VA on discussing, and would be happy to share more details with you.
So can you tell us if they're open to that? I mean, it seems like a pretty common sense solution to warehouse, or at least consolidate all the relevant information so that people don't fall through the cracks.
In our conversations, they've been very interested, and I definitely applaud the VA for being open to new solutions that could potentially offer good support to student veterans, but really all students for that matter. Presently, this process is being implemented with the Department of Education, so the model is there. I think there's a lot to be learned from that.
So what's being done for the veteran in the situation where they withdrew from a class or a semester and the bills are still being paid, and now they're responsible for them? What's being done to help that veteran?
In that case, that individual, the onus would be on them to ensure that they understand that the money that comes in, for example, and the GAO came out with a fantastic report on these overpayments that I'm sure you're referencing. In that scenario, the individual would see the money to their account. What needs to be communicated to those individuals is that money is not necessarily for them to spend. It is the result of a change that hasn't hit the system yet. I don't think that message is being communicated effectively, which is why I believe you have seen in many cases some overpayments.
So they're just seeing the money come in and they're assuming that it's theirs and that the withdrawal has already been communicated and they're spending that money.
Right, and I think the Department of Defense actually has a great example of what a solution to this might be. When they have the leave and earnings statement, the LES, they're provided on a monthly basis a itemized breakdown of what money's coming in, what it's for. In such an example, if there was a mistake or an overpayment that was made, the individual could more readily identify that versus a lump sum payment to their account, which is not clearly indicated what it's for.
So you two are obviously very impressive, but obviously the concern of this committee is how do we make things easier it's like everyone's experience with their local DMV. I mean, you know, you'd sooner bang your head against a concrete wall than go to the Department of Motor Vehicles. I mean, maybe does everyone agree with me? And the veteran process, whether it's trying to get employment or access your GI benefits, should not be an exercise of them banging their head against a wall and making them be the ones that jump through hoops. So I thank both of you and thank you for your ideas on how to make this a better experience for the veteran. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Costello, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Hubbard and Mr. Leghorn, thank you for your service to our country, and also thank you for testifying in your very substantive memos, which I had the opportunity to review. And first, as for Mr. Leghorn, I think you did a very nice job of sort of outlining a lot of the technological challenges that we have, as well as some of the opportunities there. And you did point to VEC as some of the concerns that you have. And I think, Mr. Hubbard, you delved very deeply into specifically what some of the, whether we call them problems or challenges, but really some of the opportunities as to how VEC can be improved. And I looked a little bit further on with the VA testimony to come on VEC, and I'm a little concerned about whether or not your suggestions are going to be implemented, or what the status of some of your proposals are. The automatically saving profile, you know, some of the stuff I think is really basic, but I think the more serious issues that really need to happen, and I'm asking for your feedback, it doesn't seem as though veterans are using the site as much as they should. It really doesn't feel, leaving aside the LinkedIn partnership, it doesn't really seem, from what I'm reading, that employers are using the site, and that's of concern because it's there to help veterans become employed. In fact, the questions that you ask, many of them really suggest that it's not being used for what it should be used for, or at least we're not even able to evaluate whether or not that it's successful. It's a portal, it's there, but is it working? And so my question to you is, what has been your interaction with the VA? Have they been responsive to some of your suggestions or others' suggestions out there? And where do you think we go from here in order to improve it? Because I glean from your testimony that it is good, it's worth preserving, but we need to make it a lot better than what it is in order to have it accomplish the purpose for which it was intended.
So the success of the VEC is based off of how many veterans are going to use it or are using it. And the best way to do that is success stories. We mentioned in our testimony that we have not had a single case where a veteran was preemptively contacted by an employer for interview for a job or anything like that. And I think that's what the platform was made for. You know, so if we could only get the employers to preemptively use the platform and reach out to a veteran, that's how we're going to get the success stories to sell the VEC to more veterans and get more utilization.
Let me ask you this then, particularly on the issue of public-private partnerships. We have a shortage of truckers in this country. In my state, the natural gas industry is going to be employing a lot more people in the years to come. From a public-private partnership perspective, getting certain industries where there is in-demand employment opportunities to become more acclimated to VEC, so that it's as much employer-driven as it is veteran-driven. Do you have any thoughts on making it? I mean, you seem to suggest, though, the demonstration of real and impactful public-private partnerships is worth considering. how should we consider that? How could we make it better by involving private industry more?
The most obvious point of contact is obviously with TAP program at the point where the veteran is transitioning out from military service. I think if there is a place for the private sector to engage veterans to let them know what's out there and what fields are direly in need of workers, that's the place.
You would agree that that's not happening right now, but that should be happening, and if that were to happen, then the VEC program would be markedly improved, right?
Correct.
My time has expired. Thank you.
Ms. Radwigan, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Takano. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your testimony today. Thank you for your service to our nation. Mr. Hubbard, can you please explain why you believe a partnership between VA and the National Student Clearinghouse could improve GI Bill processing times?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. Absolutely. So as I pointed out previously, the current process, you see the schools going to the different departments and agencies. To your question, what we are proposing with our partner, the National Student Clearinghouse, is that schools would go directly through this centralized organization and then to the different departments and agencies. What this process allows is for the National Student Clearinghouse, who already collects 97.7% of all higher education data regarding completions, time to degree, and a various other hosts of information, what they can do is then understand what's going on the ground, complement that with their research, use what they're getting from the Department of Education, the Department of the VA, and the Department of Defense in a combination to understand what they can do to improve. That streamlined authority would allow them to clean the data for compliance. If issues come up where the data is coming across and it's either fractured or they need to change something, they can turn that around much quicker, and they don't rely on a paper-based system to inform veterans of mistakes, thereby allowing them to turn it around quite quickly.
Thank you. I have a couple of little questions for Mr. Leghorn. Can you please go into more detail about how a small investment in improving the system that certifies monthly enrollment for GI Bill users could save VA money in the end?
Ma'am, again, I am not the person that handles education issues for the American Legion, so if I could take that question for the record, I could get you a better answer.
Thank you. Here's another one. Please expand on your statement that VA and labor must not lose sight of the human factor when it comes to these IT systems. How's that?
Okay. So thank you for your question. And the point of IT is to automate simple tasks. And what we found in the past was a veteran would usually come into a one-stop center. And in the very beginning, they were being triaged by DevOps relievers. And then they thought, well, if we put an admin assistant there to triage the veterans, we free up the DevOps and relievers to do their jobs. And then we're getting to the point where what we're seeing is, in order to free up the secretary's time, they're using IT to triage the veterans via a website or the phone system. And when let's say you're dealing with a veteran that has great distrust in the VA, reluctant to seek government services, and the first contact or the first interpersonal transaction they have with Department of Labor at the state level or VA is a machine, that's going to deter them from seeking more services, and that's what the American Legion is afraid will happen as we go forth and automate more and more functions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Well, if there are no further questions, you gentlemen are excused, and thank you for being here today and appreciate your service. I now call up our second and final panel to the witness table. With us today is Mr. Kurt Coy, the Deputy Undersecretary for Economic Opportunity for the Veterans Benefit Administration at VA. He's accompanied by General Rob Worley, Director of VA's Education Service, Mr. Jack Kammerer, Director of VA's Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Service, and Mr. Stephen Schleichman, Assistant Deputy Chief Information Officer for VA's Office of Information and Technology. Welcome back, Mr. Coy, General Worley, Mr. Kammerer. It's nice to have you with us here today, Mr. Schleichman.
So the subcommittee, thank you for inviting us to appear before you today to discuss the Office of Economic Opportunity IT capabilities. I am accompanied today by my colleagues Rob Worley, Jack Kammerer, and Stephen Schleichman. It has certainly been a very busy and challenging several years, and we are proud to report to the committee several success stories. When the post-9/11 GI Bill was established in 2008, we immediately began the process of developing a long-term solution for education claims processing. Perhaps the most significant enhancement was in September 2012 when end-to-end automation was successfully activated. Since that deployment, over 6,000 claims a day are processed without any human intervention. Last fiscal year, 52% of all post-9/11 GI Bill supplemental claims were fully automated, with another 35% partially automated. This automation has significantly reduced education claims processing times from an average of 17 to 7 days for supplemental claims and 31 to 18 days for original claims. We've also maintained a payment accuracy rate of 99.4%. The GI Bill comparison tool was internally developed and deployed in February 2014, allowing prospective students to compare educational institutions using a number of measures and attributes, helping veterans be better informed consumers. As of this month, 1.2 million unique visitors have accessed the tool. We are working on the next release of the tool prior to Veterans Day this year, which will add even more functionality. We also developed and launched the GI Bill feedback system, a centralized online reporting system that allows students to report their experiences with educational institutions. Depending on the nature of the feedback, VA may also serve as an intermediary between the student and the school, or VA may launch a targeted, risk-based review of the school. We began accepting complaints in January of 2014, and as of this month, there are over 4,500 complaints submitted, of which 3,700 have already been resolved. Finally, as a result of market surveys, VA deployed an online assessment tool called CareerScope that allows users to assess their interests and aptitudes before using the GI Bill. As of last month, over 16,000 have already initiated assessments in CareerScope. Certainly not to be outdone by their education colleagues, our VRE team is working on several enhancements. Perhaps the most significant is a new VRE case management system, a veteran-centric, paperless service delivery tool. When delivered by our OIT colleagues, it is expected that VRE will be able to better support veterans and reduce the administrative burden on their counselors. The total 2-year IT development effort that began this September is a total funding of $9.7 million. Leveraging an existing VHA system, VRE has also developed an online electronic medical referral process, eliminating a cumbersome paper-based system. Since its release 8 months ago, VRE has successfully referred over 1,900 veterans to VHA for medical services. This year, VRE also rolled out its telecounseling pilot program in March. This provides secure video conferencing to enable VRE counselors to remotely meet with and counsel veterans. Although this is in its initial phase, it has significant potential to increase VRE's responsiveness to veterans' needs, reduce travel costs, and time for veterans. VA, Defense, Labor, Education, SBA, and OPM collaborated to design and develop the Veterans Employment Center. With its inception, the VEC consolidated several government sites, bringing together job opportunities and allowing users to build an online profile that can be shared in real time. We also have a job bank that provides over 2.2 million jobs. The VEC also integrates and promotes our public-private partnerships by linking a broad set of resources, programs, and services offered by VA partner organizations. As of this summer, the site has grown to nearly 1.5 million page views by approximately 135,000 users each month. We continue to improve the VEC thanks in large part to the support of DOL, DOD, and our public-private partners. Interestingly, the VEC and the GI Bill comparison tool were built using a VA in-house digital services resources, a world-class team of talent from firms like Amazon and Google. As mentioned, it has been a busy time working to strategically leverage the best in IT, implementing legislative changes, and looking to help veterans attain personal and economic success, our core mission in the Office of Economic Opportunity. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions from you or other members of the subcommittee, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Coy, for your testimony, and I now yield myself 5 minutes for questions. First question is, we've heard that there was a significant increase in processing delays for post-9/11 GI Bill benefits after there was a decision by former Undersecretary Hickey to shift overtime funding that was originally allocated for education staff to instead fund mandatory overtime to bring down the compensation claims backlog so VA could meet its self-imposed date. Is this true?
Yes, sir.
Find this to be true? You do find it to be true. Thank you.
I'd be happy to explain more, but
sure, please.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
We generally allocate, in recent years, it's been about $6 million for overtime. We basically split that in half for the spring semester, half for the fall semester. We do this so we don't have to hire more staff to cover those peak periods, and so it sort of levels things out. This past year, we spent the $3 million in the spring semester, and processing times were just fine. Coming up this fall, around April, May, June timeframe, the decision was made that we had our $3 million left for the fall, that $2 million of that $3 million would be recouped. They did that, and in fact, processing times began to get delayed. Sometime in September, we received an additional $500,000, but that wasn't enough to be able to keep us from getting back on track. So the bottom line is we had at peak about 155,000 claims that we were behind in. Right now we have about an inventory of about 43,000 claims. In prior years, this is now after the automation of supplemental claims, in prior years that high was around 95,000. So you can see that we exceeded that.
So what would you suggest going forward?
I would suggest that hopefully this is a one-time anomaly because much of the claims backlog is down, and so I don't anticipate this happening again.
Okay, thank you. We heard rumors that since VA can't truly track how many veterans actually use the VEC, there's potential that a large amount of the site visits are being done by automation and not actually individuals. Have you found that to be true? Can you comment on that?
I'm sorry, a comment on?
Well, that a lot of the sites, a lot of the visits to the sites are being done by automation rather than actual individuals checking into the site.
I don't have any evidence of that, Mr. Chairman. We've seen the VEC usage grow over the course of time. Part of that is, as you heard some of the testimony from our SVA and Legion partners, we're listening to that feedback. One of the biggest complaints that we think we've heard from our customers, if you will, is the skills translator. We are releasing a new skills translator in hopefully the next week or two, barring a crash of IT, if you will, that will enhance that skills translator such that it can be much more useful to our veterans.
Going back to the potential for these automated visits, I guess the question would be, how long did someone stay on the site? Because if it's like 10 seconds, then it probably gives us the wrong number of use as far as usage.
I have that in my cheat sheet, Mr. Chairman. It's about 6 minutes. Actually, the real number is 5 minutes and I think 53 seconds on average.
Okay. So how long has VEC been in existence?
It was released and announced in April of last year.
Okay. So we have about 200,000 veterans transitioning from military every year. And there's, what, about 20,000 veterans? They have profiles on VEC at this time?
Currently, it's about 23,000, and that's grown somewhat significantly in the last several months. Part of the issues that you heard from our SVA and Legion partners is that the adoption of the VEC. Part of that issue is that we've revamped our TAP curriculum to include the VEC. Our partners at Department of Labor has also revised their curriculum. We're also seeing some significant help in our Veterans Economic Communities Initiative, where we have individuals that are accountable for leveraging the VEC. So we hope and expect to see the VEC starting to gain in its use.
Well, I hope so too, obviously. And I just hope it's not based on a little interest by our veterans or an access issue. So I'll look forward to hearing how we do as we move forward.
Yes, sir.
And with that, I yield back. And Mr. Takano, you're now recognized for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Coy or Mr. Worley, I understand that the updates to the GI Bill comparison tool will include valuable information to help students decide where to use their GI Bill benefits, including information about transfer rates, the different types of degrees or programs offered, and the importance of school accreditation. Can you just tell me briefly, how do community colleges compare to four-year nonprofits or for-profits on the GI Bill comparison tool calculus?
Thank you. It's a great question. And the GI Bill comparison tool is what we think to be one of our real success stories. It's only 18 or 20 months old now, and we've seen almost universal acceptance of the tool. We've had three new releases of the tool, and we've never had any downtime in the tool. Probably the only criticism that we get from the tool is that there's not enough and we want more. We listen. We're going to do a significant release, as I indicated in my oral testimony, on or before Veterans Day, which will include outcome measures for all 4-year and 2-year schools. Part of those outcome measures is, in fact, the transfer rate of students going from community colleges to 4-year schools. Rob, anything else you'd like to add?
The only thing I'd add is just to back up to the creation of the outcome measures and the tool itself. The fact that we have a transfer out rate on the tool is a result of the vetting of these tools with the larger community, both other federal agencies as well as the community college associations. And so there are both completion rates, graduation rates, as well as the transfer out rates that are focused on the 2-year institutions.
Okay. Can you share with us your reasoning for including this new information about transfer rates, for example, on the GI Bill comparison tool? Was it based on problems you were seeing with certain types of schools?
No, sir. The development of these outcome measures has taken several years, and it's developed into a sort of seismic shift in the way schools are looking at leveraging the GI Bill and serving our veterans. The outcome measures, and there's 5 or 6 of them, as Mr. Worley indicated, was done in conjunction and in partnership with education, labor, and a host of other associations where we could narrow down getting information about individual schools And what we're doing is we're taking the results of those outcome measures, which currently are on the GI Bill website and available for anybody to look at, and we're including that and inculcating that into our GI Bill comparison tool.
What information does the updated comparison tool provide students on whether their credits will transfer, say if they start at a community college, or a for-profit, or later transfer to a four-year nonprofit college? Does it provide information such as that?
We currently provide some minimal information on that. We expect in some releases next year where schools are going to be able to ensure that they fill in those blanks. Right now, we take that information from the Department of Education's website and put it in there. Soon in a release, hopefully early next year, we're going to have that capability to have schools input some of that information.
What information does it provide to help students understand school accreditation? For example, if students just see that a school is nationally accredited, they might not know what that means. How does the updated comparison tool explain aspects of accreditation that veterans need to know?
There's two or three ways that we do that, and we account for that. First is on the tool itself. It reflects what the accreditation standards are for that particular school. There's also an info button for somebody to go, what does accreditation mean? I don't get this. So we provide that information. Literally just yesterday, we released a 3.5-minute video that talks about know before you go, and it talks about accreditation in there. We also announced yesterday our new choosing the right school and a new updated piece in there as well with accreditation. So we think we're getting the word out as much as we can on the issue of accreditation, and we know that it's important to you as well, Congressman.
Thank you so much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bosch. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Coy, is the information on VIC a secure system, and is the system hosted on the VA's website, or is it a third-party system?
It's a great question. First, yes, sir, it is secure. We've got no, absolutely none indications that there's been any intrusions. Currently, it is part of the VA's rollout this Veterans Day for vets.gov. The server that it is hosted on is a VA-approved server, but it is, in fact, a server that we, if you will, lease from a company called Salesforce.
Okay, so that's the reason why it's clear when you click on it, it doesn't it shows up that it's hosted by a third-party site. Correct? That would be the reason it does.
I don't know where it says anywhere on there that it's hosted by a third-party site, but I can go back and check.
If you'll check that.
Absolutely.
And my next question, and I asked this of the other panel, following some of the functional issues we've heard and everything like that, do you think maybe it was rolled out too quick?
Well, it's a great question. I don't know that I have a really great answer for that. We certainly probably would have liked in 2020 hindsight to have resolved several things before we rolled it out, but we did roll it out, and one of the great attributes of the VEC is that it's maintained by our digital services team. The team that I mentioned in my oral testimony is a team that right now is about 20 or 22 folks. They want to grow to about 75 folks. And what this team does is it brings in talent from the outside, from Google, Amazon, LinkedIn. They're 1 or 2 year appointments. So it's sort of like the Peace Corps. They come in and they do their thing for a couple years and then they leave, and it's a rotating basis. And what this allows us to do is, rather than this is release 1, this is release 2, this is release 3, what it allows us to do is be very agile and very mobile, be able to change things pretty much on the fly. As I indicated, one of the big things that we're going to change on the tool coming out in the next week or so is an enhanced skills translator, which we heard loud and clear was one of the bigger complaints.
Okay. Just one quick follow-up question on what I was asking before, and because right now with the concerns that we've had with every time we turn around, someplace, somewhere is broken into to get people's personal information. Are we sure that the people that sign up, all the veterans are protected and their personal information is protected through this system?
Absolutely, sir. It's one of our highest priorities in this. First off, there's no PII information on the VEC, and it's one of the reasons why we have sort of a separate two systems, because nobody can go to the VEC and then intrude their e-benefits account. We've built the VEC such that if you want to save your resume and your profile, you have to go through the DS login, but you're not in, if you will, e-benefits because e-benefits has a lot of information that's in there. So I'm pretty confident. I don't think in the world of IT anybody can say 100% confident, but we're pretty sure. We've not seen any intrusions as of yet.
Okay. Have you got any input at all from DOD or DOL with any issues that they have with the system?
We developed the VEC in concert with DOL and DOD. They were there with us every step of the way. There's a bit of history to this. There was a task force that was developed on veteran employment. I was on that task force of senior leaders, and we looked at a number of different sites. We had a site, it was called vetsuccess.gov, so we had the bones of a site. The decision was made that VA would take the lead on developing the VEC, and so we charged off and did that.
Okay, thank you. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Rice, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Coy, if I could just ask about a couple of the systems. I'm curious about the GI Bill feedback system that allows veterans, obviously, to their dependent survivors to talk about their experience. And in here, it said that there were 4,500 complaints submitted, 3,500 of them were resolved. Can you just talk about how that is working? Because that seems to me to be, any business, if you're going to be successful, you want to know, do you have satisfied customers?
Absolutely. It's one of our great sources of pride is the ability for a student to lodge a complaint against the school. As I indicated in my oral testimony, what happens is in many cases, it's a communication problem. It's a problem that is between the school and the student, and we hope that that gets resolved. But what happens is the front end of this tool is automated. The back end is rather ugly because it's an entirely manual process. We have someone who literally looks at every single complaint, and if in fact the complaint is such that it needs to go to the school, the complaint is sent to the school. The school is asked for to provide a response. Oftentimes the school reaches out to the student to talk about this particular issue. There are times where we initiate a risk-based compliance review based upon the information, and some of those complaints are not really valid for the tool. Most of the complaints that we want to have or the tool is set up for issues and concerns about principles of excellence, illegal or improper recruiting and marketing and those kinds of things. But there are still folks that also Rob hates it when I say this, but they're cheeseburger complaints, meaning, the food in the cafeteria is really bad and you guys ought to do something about that, and so we can't do anything with that. But it's a real success story because what we do is when we get, and I've seen a number of these responses from the schools, sometimes they're 4 or 5 page letters. They take these things very, very seriously. As a result of that, some of these complaints are also logged on the Consumer Sentinel database, and it's available to be reviewed by law enforcement agencies. The other thing that we've done to try and be incredibly transparent is we put the complaint system responses on the GI Bill comparison tool so veterans or students can see how many complaints that school has gotten and what are the nature of those complaints.
2 other aspects of this system that I'd ask you to talk about. The first one is the career scope, and the military skills translator. They seem like really, really good aspects of the system, but I wonder, can you just briefly, obviously talk about the pluses, minuses, and do you have enough people accessing them? Because it seems to me like that is the kind of directed help that veterans need to not spin their wheels in trying to find either educational or employment opportunities.
The Career Scope tool we did after a significant amount of market research, and what we found is we had a tool in our own backyard. Our vocational rehabilitation and education or employment folks have been using Career Scope for their clients for some time now, so we leveraged that and used that Career Scope. And it's an interesting tool because it helps veterans measure their interests and aptitudes. What do I want to do when I get out, or what should I do now that I'm out? In terms of the skill translator, that's on the VEC, which is a sort of different tool. But the skills translator, we're in the process of updating, and barring any IT concerns or issues, we expect to have that new, improved, and very well thought out skills translator before Veterans Day of this year.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Costello, you're now recognized for 5
Thank you. And picking up where Ms. Rice left off with that question in your answer, you meant the enhanced skills translator you're going to make more useful. Can you just describe how it will be more useful?
The best I can do probably is give you a good example. 11 Bravo is an occupational code. The current skills translator says basically uses their hands and can read English. I think it's something like that. The new skills translator takes the research that, for example, LinkedIn has done and used it in a much more reliable and commercial way. So we think it shows great promise because one of the bigger problems that many veterans have as they're translating out is, so what are my skills and attributes, and what kind of things can I expect to see? And so we think there's going to be a great enhancement.
You have a lot of industry participation in that?
The principal partner we've had in that is LinkedIn, and they've done a lot of market research and had a lot of success in that.
But you're ultimately talking about identifying what skills, you're ultimately looking for industry to identify what skills they need so that when veterans go through the skills translator process, it's leading them to the industries where there's employment opportunity. Is that correct?
Yes. LinkedIn's market research indicates the sort of key words that a lot of industry partners want to see on those particular resumes. It's just a piece of the pie, though, because just because you did something in the service doesn't mean you necessarily want to do it in your civilian life. It's why Career Scope is important. It measures your interests and aptitudes. It's why the skills translator is important, because it sort of tells you what industry thinks of your skills, and so it goes both ways.
I futuristically here, and I am the first person to admit that I'm not a techie. You mentioned about the teams that you have, and you have folks from Google and Amazon. They come for a year or two. VEC employs, I don't even know what this is, agile methodology in managing the software development's life cycle. That sounds pretty good. I
thought it sounded pretty good, too.
It does. There's actually a couple of sentences before that sound really good, but I didn't want to. One of the frustrations I know I have, I think other members, I don't want to speak for them, shared, is when you look at some of the technology that VA has used in other areas, it's almost like dead technology that's just sort of like limping along, whereas it appears as though with VEC, you've done it in a way that you're going to constantly be able to update it and refine it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's one of the really neat and fun things that when you work with these digital service folks, they're not, my colleague Steve is going to hit me, but they're not necessarily your stereotypical government employees. These are folks straight in from Google and Amazon, and they're in there to make a difference. And I've been in rooms with them where we've had the comparison tool up on there on the screen, and we're talking about moving things around or doing this and what if, and every single time it's absolutely we can do that. And so it becomes incredibly exciting because they can do it literally just like that, right there on the spot, and change the tool.
Mr. Hubbard, in his testimony, laid out some some things that should be revised, as well as some questions that I think are very logically should be addressed. Have you had the opportunity to look at his testimony, and where are you in the process? How often are you updating VEC? It seems to me as though you have sort of another VEC 2.0 with what you're going to roll out here with the Enhanced Skills Facilitator, but how often are you revisiting and working out the kinks and making it better?
The short answer is all day, every day. But the longer answer is right now, VA is going to roll out vets.gov, and it's a new veteran-centric website. The comparison tool and the VEC are two of the superstars that's going to be initiated with that. So they're in the process right now of making the entire VEC more user-friendly, just like the comparison tool. It's going to have a different look and feel. It's going to have all of the same information, but a different look and feel and a better user experience.
Do you think you're headed for much better results in terms of, taking that 23,000 and really increasing the number of users as well as the user experience? I mean, is that where we're, I hope we all hope that's where we're headed. Do you feel that?
I not only feel it, I believe it. I think we're going to start seeing some significant changes in the way we do business and some significant user-friendly sort of changes to the VEC as well.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Radewagen, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Coy, how many other veteran job boards like VA for Vets, H2H, Vet Central, or others were replaced by the then new and untested VEC? Wouldn't it have been easier to just use an existing system instead of creating something that not only doesn't seem to work, but no one appears to like?
I think it would have probably been easier to let some other system exist and not take on that challenge, most certainly. We took a look, our consortium, this is not VA, this was our consortium of our labor partners, our defense partners, and the other partners that were on that task force that I mentioned. And so the decision was made in a consensus way for some of these other sites, many of which were very, very redundant. And so those decisions were not made by VA. They were made by the individual services and whoever was in charge of those particular systems. As I mentioned, we had a site, VA, it was a VRE site called vetsuccess.gov, and we saw the bones of that, and we leveraged that into what is now the VEC.
Thank you. I've been told that certain VA contractors are required to log into VEC each day as a way to increase the number of page views. Is this true?
I have no evidence whatsoever until someone recently mentioned that to me. I asked my IT folks to look into that, and there's no evidence of that. But if there's a source and somebody could help me understand better, I'd be happy to look into it.
And lastly, we've been told that VEC does not work on some Internet web browsers, and that on certain DoD bases, they are unable to access the VEC during TAP due to this and other connectivity issues. Can you please comment on this?
We did have some issues with connectivity on some of the DoD installations. We think we've turned that corner, but there's still probably some sites that we have a challenge with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Well, thank you. I just have one. I want to say good luck on Veterans Day with the rollout of the one site. Yeah, keep your fingers crossed, right? And I hope it is successful, and I do wish the VA well on that. You know, one of the things that was talked about a little bit today, and there was reports of some scam artists getting to some of the people that had signed up, trying to get money out of them. Did you want to comment on that? Or?
It was an interesting few days because there was a scam that was perpetuated. The scam basically notified the veteran that says, we found your name on the Veterans Employment Portal, not Veterans Employment Center, but it's portal. And we're sending you, we're going to send you a check for $1,000 because we want to hire you. And so we want you to deposit that check as soon as you get it and go out and buy a computer for less than $1,000. And then we want you to take what's left over of that $1,000 and send it back to us in the way of a money order. And so anybody that knows these things, they did. And of course you deposit the check and you go out that afternoon and buy a computer. But then 10 days later, you find out the check is bounced. You've already sent a money order back to that company. You're out that difference of money. We did a significant marketing campaign to get that information out to as many veterans as possible, sort of under the rubric of if it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. But there are a lot of those kinds of scams that are out there all the time, and we try and stay ahead of them.
Well, thank you very much for doing that and for responding to it. These things can happen to anyone at any time. If you ever feel that you need our backing to suggest an IG study, and I don't mean on a punitive way towards anything you're doing, but in a positive way to make sure we're protecting our veterans, I'd be glad to stand with you on that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
But thank you. And I thank the witnesses for your testimony and for answering our questions. I think it's clear that we need to assure that the IT systems need to have the attention from VA senior leaders and that they need to be a priority for the department in general. I do appreciate the valuable discussion from all of our witnesses here today on how to improve these systems to help our veterans reach maximum economic success, and I look forward to working together to do that. I now ask unanimous consent that a statement from the Veterans of Foreign Wars be submitted into the hearing record. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Finally, I ask all members that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material in the record of today's hearing. Hearing no objection, so ordered. And if there's nothing further, this hearing is adjourned.
You did a great job in your first testimony.
On time for the other one? Yeah. No need to apologize. This is great. Let's do more of these. Thanks, guys.
Jack, it's a pleasure to see you. Yeah. How did that turn out? Okay, great. Good. Yeah, we're doing what we can. Traffic's there, but yeah, definitely staying good out. Good to see you guys.